Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1008 for June 11th, 2023. Coming up in a few minutes.
It's really been my baby of sorts, and so letting go of that and letting teams take over this and that, tasks that I was doing by myself before, that has unquestionably been the hardest part.
I was in Wyoming this week to visit with the folks at Wyoming Whiskey, just a couple of months after Edrington increased its minority stake in the distillery to 80% majority ownership. Co-founder David DeFazio and I sat down for a catch-up interview to go over the sale and what it means for a distillery that we've been following for more than a decade here on WhiskyCast. We'll also hear from Wyoming Whiskey's original master distiller, Steve Nally, who just happened to be in town on vacation during our visit, and they'll debate the story of Outrider, a whiskey born of an act of defiance by Steve Nally. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Dads aren't the best at dropping hints, so I'll do it on their behalf. Get him Redbreast, the world's most awarded single pot still Irish whiskey. Hint, hint.
Happy Father's Day from Redbreast, proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
The new Dewar's 19-year-old Champions Edition has been released, and it's a masterpiece that honors the 123rd U.S. Open in a special way. More about that later.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. We have to start with some sad news. Diageo Chief Executive Sir Ivan Menezes died Tuesday night at a London hospital where he was being treated for a stomach ulcer. The 63-year-old Menezes was knighted earlier this year for his contributions to business and diversity and was scheduled to retire at the end of this month. Deborah Crew had been scheduled to take over as CEO on July 1st. That timetable has been advanced in the wake of Menezes' death. He leaves behind his wife and 2 children. In other news, Brown-Forman has won its trademark infringement case before the U.S. Supreme Court. The court ruled Thursday that a Bad Spaniel's dog toy was not protected free speech and ordered a lower court to reconsider the case using stricter trademark law standards. Brown-Forman also reported its quarterly earnings this week, beating analyst estimates for revenue. However, gross margins suffered slightly from the same period a year ago because of higher prices for raw materials. The company also benefited from stronger global sales as export markets restocked following the pandemic and related supply chain disruptions. Brown-Forman executives projected an annual net sales growth of between 5 and 7% this year. The company's B shares ended the week up slightly. On the whiskey front, Brown-Forman unveiled a new range of single malts from Glenglassaugh Distillery. The lineup includes a new 12-year-old along with no-age statements Portsoy, which gets its name from the village neighboring the distillery, and Sandend, named for Sandend Bay near the distillery. There are also plans for older expressions to be released later this year. Aberfeldy Distillery is expanding its red wine cask collection series with a 15-year-old limited edition single malt. It's been finished in Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon wine casks and is available while supplies last for $69.99 a bottle. Beam Suntory is launching a new blended Scotch whiskey. Ardrey is a collaboration between Beam Suntory chief Scotch blender Callum Fraser and the Suntory whiskey blending team in Japan. Ardrey will be available initially in London, Shanghai, Los Angeles, and New York, with a recommended retail price of $80 a bottle, with plans to expand to other global markets in the coming months. And Ian MacLeod Distillers is expanding the availability of its King Robert II blended Scotch range to the U.S. There are 3 different whiskeys in the range with a no-age statement treble cask matured blend, 12 and 15-year-old blends. Prices range from $14.99 for the treble cask to $28.99 for the 15-year-old. Buffalo Trace is expanding its line of Weller bourbons with a new experimental range named for Daniel Weller, the grandfather of William LaRue Weller. The initial release is almost 12 years old and was made with emmer wheat, an ancient grain mainly used for bread and beer. There will be a new Daniel Weller wheated bourbon every other year, but this year's version is available in limited quantities at a recommended retail price of $499.99 a bottle. New York's Hudson Whiskey is celebrating the 20th anniversary of Tuttletown Distillery with a new 5-year-old straight bourbon. It's made from a mash bill of 95% corn and 5% malted barley, all supplied by Hudson Valley farmers. It'll be available nationwide with a recommended retail price of $49.99 a bottle. Ireland's Killowen Distillery has released 2 single-cask bottlings exclusively for the U.S. market. One is a single pot still whiskey matured completely in a white cognac cask using Killowen's own distillate. The second is a sourced whiskey from Cooley Distillery that was finished in a West Indies coconut rum cask. They're priced at $106 a bottle for the white cognac cask, and the coconut rum and raisin whiskey is priced at $69 a bottle. I received samples of both this week, and I'll have tasting notes for them soon at WhiskyCast.com. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Time now to take a look at upcoming whiskey events going on around the world. Our calendar is brought to you by Writer's Tears. The Twisted Tail in Philadelphia hosts Dip and Sip with Maker's Mark this Wednesday night. Whiskey Live Brisbane is this coming Friday and Saturday. Sagamore Spirits' next Whiskey on the Waterfront party is on Saturday at the Distillery in Baltimore, Maryland. The Fraser History Museum in Louisville hosts a Michter's Speakeasy party on the 22nd. Whiskey X Denver is on the 23rd. The Erin Malt and Music Festival runs from the 23rd through the 25th in Lacranza, Scotland. The Whiskey Show is June 24th in Canberra, Australia, along with the Stoke-on-Trent Whiskey Festival in Stoke, England, and the Waterford Distillery Growers Gathering Festival in Waterford, Ireland. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it, and we'll add it to the calendar at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The calendar is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copper Pot, an 18th century style of premium Irish whiskey, blended from single pot still and single malt. Like yourself, it's one of life's treasured rarities, and what's rare is wonderful. Writer's Tears Copper Pot.
Gabriel here, and I have 3 things to mention, so just hang with me a moment. First, the 2023 U.S. Open is coming up, and it's being contested at the Los Angeles Country Club. Second, Dewar's is the official Scotch whiskey of the 123rd U.S. Open. Third, and most important, every year we are the official Scotch whiskey of the U.S. Open. We release a special 19-year-old Champions edition to commemorate the event. This year takes things up a notch. To honor the championship's host state of California, this year's Dewar's 19-year-old Champions edition is double-aged, then finished in Napa Valley red wine casks from Northern California vineyards. I've tried it, and this whiskey is fantastic. You should try it too. Please drink responsibly. Copyright 2023, Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 43% alcohol by volume.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. Wyoming Whiskey celebrated the 10th anniversary of its first bourbon release last December, and this April, Edrington increased its ownership stake from 35% to 80%, taking majority control of the distillery from founders Brad and Kate Mead and David DeFazio. While the impact of the sale has barely been felt in the tiny town of Kirby, Wyoming, population 76, Edrington is already starting to put its stamp on the brand. When I sat down this week with David DeFazio, he saw that as a good thing for the greater good of the brand, even though it meant giving up creative control over new releases and Wyoming Whiskey's identity.
First of all, tell me how the deal with Edrington came about in the first place.
You know, we had, as a company, done everything that we could do to be great, right? And we had control of our grain grower. We had control of our production. We were making good whiskey, and we got to a point, and we had a great marketing company in 77 Ventures, but we couldn't establish distribution. And so there was, what I had said to myself is, we need a partner that has distribution. We don't need venture capital. We need people that have money, but they need to bring something else to the table, and distribution is the number one thing that we couldn't accomplish by ourselves. So there were a couple of different things that went into effect all at once, one of which being I went to the Shanken Impact Seminar in New York City, and my goal was to get a card from every executive in the room and then follow up with them and try to educate them about Wyoming whiskey. And so while that was going on, we were also having some introductions made through different people and different avenues, and Edrington was one of the many companies that took it, basically said, okay, we're interested in what these guys are doing. And I would say there were about a dozen companies that took some interest within the 3 months following the Impact Seminar. And then through attrition and us calling out some of them and others calling us out, we ended up with basically 2 at the end, and then Edrington was the winner, so to speak, and I was very happy about that.
And it led to them taking majority control earlier this year.
Yeah, it was a 2-stage process. They bought a third of us 5 years ago, and then this past April 1st, they got into a position where they bought, and then they now own 80% of the company, and Brad, Kate, and I own the remaining 20.
But you're still president of Wyoming Whiskey, right?
I'm still present. I'm not president. No, I'm now the national ambassador for Wyoming Whiskey. Edrington is doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to the stuff that I was doing before, which feels very empty right now. I'm a doer. I like working. And so it's been a difficult transition for me emotionally. But at the end of the day, it's the right thing for the brand. And I think Edrington's going to do good things for us.
What's been the hardest part of this transition besides learning to let go?
That is the hardest part, candidly. That for me, from the beginning when Brad and Kate said, this is for you, got to figure out how to make whiskey. And I made a bunch of mistakes along the way. I made every mistake in the book, but I'd never made the same mistake twice. So it's really been my baby of sorts. And so letting go of that and letting teams take over this and that, tasks that I was doing by myself before, that has unquestionably been the hardest part. But we've gained distribution. We've gained, this sales force that's enormous and hugely talented. And we've got a marketing arm in Scotland and in New York. I mean, all of that are things that, one person can do by himself, even with a small team behind him. So this has been a very good time for us. I think Wyoming Whiskey is going to grow in ways that we never could have done as a standalone distiller. And so it's a good time, but for me, it's just been an emotional period. But I'm getting better.
What have you learned from this that other small-scale distillers could learn from?
A ton. I think that there are certain small distilleries that should remain small distilleries because of knowing myself. If I was in a smaller distillery, I don't think I would want to become part of a corporate giant. I would want to stay small. You maintain control, 100% control of what you're doing, for better or for worse. And I think that there are certain personalities, having met a number of the distillers and entrepreneurs that have started these companies, that I don't think that they should or would ever want to do that. And I would say stay true to your craft and stay true to what you're doing. But there are other distilleries out there that all along want to obtain wider distribution, more national, if not global presence. And with them, I would say you need to make the best possible product that you can and have small victories in small markets. Don't spread yourself too thin. Get to a point where you become an attractive target in your region, own it, and then what a big company can do, or how they will view that is, okay, these guys have done a tremendous amount with the limited resources that they have in this small area. We will then amplify that on a national or global scale over time. So with those people, I would say don't spread yourself too thin. take ego out of it. You don't have to be in New York City. You don't have to be in Chicago. Pick your market where you're at and own it and crush it, and then people will start to take notice.
What's been the reaction here in Wyoming to Wyoming whiskey not being Wyoming owned anymore?
Minimal. Candidly, I don't think a lot of people know that this is where we're at right now. We didn't make a point of trumpeting it from the rooftops, that this had happened. Candidly, I don't think it's in our best interest to do that. But to anybody who would question whether or not, we're going to remain true to who we are, I can assure you that Edrington has absolutely no intent in changing how we make our whiskey, where we make our whiskey, who our grain grower is. They want to amplify what we have been doing and just put a slightly glossier polish or shine to what we do, and then use their international muscle to bring us into markets that we never could have achieved otherwise. So to answer your question originally, there has been no reaction so far because I don't think many people know about it other than those in our close circle, and they've been very congratulatory because it's something that most companies will never be able to achieve. And so there's some backpatting that's been happening, and it has felt good to hear people say those things. And it feels good to be in the position we're in. Who would have thought when you and I first met 10, 11 years ago, that you and I would be sitting here after Edrington has acquired a majority interest in our company? Who would have ever thought that? That's a great thing.
Let's go back a few years to the last time we talked. At the time, Sam Mead was still the head distiller, and Nancy hadn't come on board yet. Mm-hmm. And lots changed since then, hasn't it?
A tremendous amount. I would say the level of our sophistication has risen meaningfully, in many different ways, from front end of the process to the back end. Nancy brought a tremendous amount of knowledge and ability that, we just simply could not achieve on our own. The addition of Curtis, on the front end, he's a chemist. He's a mad chemist, and he does a fantastic job on the front end of stuff. And then he and Nancy working together to make a seamless transition from beginning to end of the process. The whiskey that we're putting out today is so far superior to what we were doing in the beginning because of the expertise of all these people who have not only been willing but wanting to be a part of the team. And that it's gotten us to a great place. We wouldn't be with Edrington if it wasn't for the efforts of all those folks.
Would you do this all over again?
Absolutely. I love a challenge. The entrepreneurial side of it is what attracted me the most. And candidly, if Brad or Kate or whomever else had approached me 17 years ago and said, we want to make shoes, it would have been the same challenge for me. I mean, I've always liked bourbon. My dad was a bourbon drinker, and so it definitely fit into, I wouldn't call it a passion of mine, but it was definitely an interest of mine. But I wear shoes too, and it would have been interesting to figure out how to make the next best sneaker, or the next best dress shoe or whatever. And so I really, the challenge and the business side of it is what has always driven me. And, the question now is, what's next? Everybody keeps asking me what's next. And I love practicing law, and I'm doing more legal work now. But, the wheels have started to turn. What is the next act? And I'm not ready for it yet. I'm still very much invested emotionally, intellectually, financially in Wyoming Whiskey, and I want to see it succeed. So I'm not in any rush to exit. But I think I've got another act in me. So it would be interesting to see what that is and what that is ultimately.
Did you find your passion in shepherding Wyoming whiskey to this point?
For sure. But here I am drinking a Coors. I mean, it's one of those things where it's not like I drink whiskey 24/7. I love bourbon. I love our bourbon. I think that we make a fantastic product now, but at the same time, my interests are very divergent and varied. And so when you ask me, did I find my passion? I would say yes, I have found my passion as far as the development of a brand from the genesis moment through its infancy, through its difficult teenage years, until adulthood, and that is the most fulfilling thing I've ever done professionally. And so I don't like to use the word pride or proud very often, but I'm very proud of what the Meads and I have accomplished to getting it to this point. And like I said, it's not over yet, but I would say that achieving the success that we've achieved here and learning what I've learned about an industry that I didn't think I would ever know this much about has been hugely rewarding.
What do you think the future holds 5 years from now?
For the company?
Yeah.
I think you're going to see more a global presence. We just have a toe in the water right now in Mexico, Canada. We did a couple barrels in Taiwan when we were a standalone. So these were just little tester markets. Edrington, once we have more volume available, you're going to see us launching into specific markets that they have deemed appropriate. For Wyoming Whiskey, I mean, they've been selling whiskey for a long time, and I trust their judgment on where we would be launching. But I think that would be the number one thing. I don't think you're going to see a huge change in our portfolio. Of course, you're going to see very select offerings, higher end offerings. Just today, talking to Nancy about the barrels that she was sampling, she was like, David, we have some barrels here we could do something completely different with. And that's fun, to have so many thousands of barrels to be selecting from at this point. And we don't want to get spread too thin, but I think you'll see, one or two extensions at some point. Maybe we do a rye, maybe we do something similar to that. I don't know, but I think the number one thing is you're going to see Wyoming Whiskey represented in more markets, and we will probably be overseas in a meaningful way in 5 years.
Now, there were a couple of unexpected but very much welcome visitors during our press trip. Wyoming Whiskey's original master distiller, Steve Nally, and his wife, Donna, left the distillery in 2014, but loved Wyoming so much that they still have a vacation home in nearby Thermopolis and stop by the distillery when they're in town, as they were this week. It gave me a chance to catch up with Steve and his work over the last few years as master distiller at Bardstown Bourbon Company.
Basically, just to bring folks up to date on what happened after you left. You're at Bardstown Bourbon Company now. Tell us what you've been doing.
Just been crazy busy. We've been growing ever since we started. We started 2014. We purchased approximately 100 acres of ground, and we started the process. Of course, we started a custom distillation process, and we built, at the beginning, 1.5 million proof gallon capacity, and we had enough customers sign on to fill that 85%. We kept about 15% for ourselves. That was in September of 2016. And 2017, in June, we needed to expand. So we expanded to 3 million proof gallons. 2018, we needed to expand again, so we went to 6 million proof gallons. So ever since then, we've just been growing. And this past year, our founder, Peter Lawson, passed away in 2019. So his holdings were left in a trust. And the trust kept us going, but they really couldn't allow us to grow like we needed to and like we could. So in 2020, we were bought out by the Pritzker Investment Group, and they had the capacity and the ability to allow us to grow. So this year we're growing. We're expanding 50% more. We bought 300 more acres of ground, allow us to build 14 more warehouses. We're now in 2024, we'll be able to produce about 200,000 barrels per year. They'll put us at about 9 million proof gallons of production. And we're just, the custom production that we're doing being unlike kind of in the past, people went out and they bought excess production from other companies. We custom produce, being that our customers come in and work with us to produce the recipe or a mash bill of their specifications. So that's really the exciting thing about what we do. And we just have people come in every day wanting us to produce for them. And we could grow again after this one if we wanted to. We just, you get to the point that you can do what you do good, and you feel like if you went more, you wouldn't do it justice. So I think we're kind of at the point now we need to just slow down and do what we do right. We're producing 64 recipes, which is over and above well what anybody else does. The most anybody does I know of is 5 or 6, but we custom produce each one's recipe for them. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We've got, in 2024, we'll have 4 stills, column stills running. 2 of them are 36 inch, one of them is a 42. We'll have 32, 48, 13,000 gallon fermenters. They're all running 24/7 nonstop. Last year we shut down 2 weeks for maintenance, 1 day and a half at Christmas. And then we ran 24 hours, 24/7 nonstop. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Like I said, we're just running continuous all the time.
But you still fell in love with Wyoming when you came out here for the first time, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Wyoming's still near and dear to my heart. You know, it's just a great place. You know, the product that was developed is a great product. So, yeah, Wyoming's just a wonderful place out here.
Do you keep up with what they're doing out here?
I do. I mean, every time I come out here, I'll come visit them, see what's going on, keep up with what's happening. So, it's like I said, it's near and dear to my heart. It was my first venture after leaving Maker's Mark to kind of establish or put my knowledge that I had accumulated over the 32 years at Maker's is my first chance to put it to use. So it's my first, trial of doing what I had learned to do.
Does it bother you that they've changed some of the processes a little bit? They've automated some things and tweaked some other things from what you originally started out with? Well,
that was kind of a progression of the day and times. I mean, at Bardstown Bourbon, we've changed a lot of stuff. Automations. When I learned at Maker's Mark, I learned everything manual, pretty much. Everything was hands-on, manual. There was very little, if any, automation. The first automation I did was to automate the cooling water process in the distillery. That everything else was manual. And today at Bardstown Bourbon, we have some manual production, but there's so much technology in the world today that if you don't do some automation, keep up with the times, you just can't survive. So you have to change with the times to keep going. So no, it doesn't bother me. I started out, probably one of my biggest learning curves out here was adjusting to the climate and the altitude. I had to adjust my cooking process, my aging process and all that to adjust to the climate and the humidity.
What else do you want to accomplish in this business? I mean, you've built 2 distilleries of your own now, between here and Bardstown, 32 years at Maker's Mark, Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Famer. What's left?
I think just enjoy, the rest of the time. I'm going to have fun and enjoy promoting and selling bourbon as long as I can. How much longer that'll be, I don't know, but as long as I can, I'll just enjoy it and go there.
I have heard David's story of Outrider, and you know where I'm going with this. I want to get your side of what became Outrider, because I know you don't like rye whiskeys per se, but tell me your story of why you only did 48% rye in those early years.
Well, rye whiskey is a very, very tough animal to produce. I felt comfortable producing wheat bourbon, and I produced a rye bourbon as opposed to a rye whiskey because being out here in a different climate, a different world, I did not feel comfortable producing a rye whiskey. And I don't know that I'd feel comfortable producing it out here today because we have just conquered the wild beast in Kentucky of producing it. We do produce it, but it's just a very tough animal, and I didn't want to produce it and have a flop out here, so I produced what I felt comfortable producing and satisfied him at the same time, and it didn't become known until after I left.
Yeah, because we're talking about that phone call 5 years later. Right. David, come over here for a second. Well, I just did. He said he didn't feel comfortable making a rye whiskey out in this climate.
I think that's BS. There's more intent behind this than he's leading you to believe, and I'm going to stand by that.
Well, I'm standing by what I did, and it all worked out. Everything was great, and you would have really freaked out if you'd came in and the floor would have been full of mash running over the fermenters.
Well, I heard about it. You called me that day, and he said some expletives that I won't repeat here, and told me what a bad blank an idea this was, and how sticky this blank was. But I'm going to challenge him on the rye thing, because does 3 points make a difference? 48% rye versus 51. Do you think there was that big of a difference out here with the heat that would have really messed things up?
In my mind, yes. And we'll let it go at that.
I'm going to put you on the spot in front of all these people. I want you to tell the whole story in front of all these folks, because I want to hear the story from your side.
I just did.
I want to hear it here live in front of everyone, and they do too. Yes.
Okay, I wasn't comfortable. Okay, we'll do it later.
Let's close the loop on the story of Outrider. Master blender Nancy Fraley joined the team after Steve left and works closely alongside current production manager Curtis Chopping, but she's the one who had to take that 48% rye-ish whiskey and make something out of it.
So when I came to Wyoming Whiskey in October of 2014, I tasted through some of that 3-year-old rye-ish whiskey. I didn't know that it was rye-ish whiskey at the time, but I'll tell you what, it was some of the best rye whiskey I've ever had. Only to discover a year later, 2 years later, that what we had was not rye whiskey. It was only 48% rye. And not 51. So that really, it's a blender that really created a conundrum for me. What do we do with this? And given the amount that we had laid down in 2011, I decided that really the only thing that we could do was to make some kind of bull rye with it. But of course, again, not being a rye whiskey, what do you do? So what I did, I created a blend using 1/3 of the rye-ish whiskey and 2/3 of the rye bourbon, and created that blend, and just wanted to see how it was going to go. And lo and behold, we have a cult following with it. It's a product that's so highly in demand that even once we actually did start laying down true rye whiskey, we couldn't stop that product. We just could not stop doing Outrider. It's kind of become like I said, it has a cult following now. So yeah, that's the story behind that, and now as of last 2 years ago, would have been 2021. The blend uses all actually like a real rye whiskey in the blend, and not a rye-ish whiskey. So it is now a true rye, bow rye. So which is great to actually have it. But I still love the original story, and I love Steve Nally's obstinance. Sometimes mistakes create the best happy accidents.
By the way, they're planning a big party in Kirby on June 24th to unveil the year's Wyoming-only release. It's named Integrity and honors former Senator Alan Simpson. Full disclosure, I was a guest of Wyoming Whiskey on a press trip this week. However, full editorial control over this segment remains with WhiskyCast. That's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. Let's start off with a couple of Wyoming whiskey bourbons I had not tasted until this week. Their double cask bourbon is finished in PX sherry casks and bottled at 50% ABV. The nose is nutty and aromatic with dried fruits, blackberries, oatmeal cookies, and black cherries. The taste is warming and fruity with dried fruits, a hint of cinnamon, black cherries, and blackberries. The finish is long with touches of blackberries and black cherries, and I'm scoring the Wyoming Whiskey double cask a 94. They changed things up for the 10th anniversary 10-year-old bourbon, swapping rye for wheat in the mash bill. It's bottled at 51.7% ABV, and the nose has touches of baking spices, honey, orange peel, pecan pie, and walnut. The taste has notes of clove and cinnamon balanced by orange peel, honey, and a nice nuttiness. The finish is long with lingering spices. It may be hard to find a bottle of this one, but get it if you can. I'm scoring the Wyoming Whiskey 10th Anniversary 10-Year-Old Bourbon a 95. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, our tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit, a 200-time award-winning Maryland-style rye whiskey. With a determined focus to create the best rye whiskey imaginable, Sagamore's team of distillers crafts each spirit with a nod to both tradition and innovation. Find their signature, Double Oak, Cask Strength, or Reserve Series rye whiskeys, as well as their line of premium rye whiskey canned cocktails at a retailer near you. Visit sagamorespirit.com/find-rye. Please drink responsibly. Next up, let's look at the latest release from Steve Nally and his team at Bardstown Bourbon Company. I mentioned the new Discovery Series number 10 on last week's show. It's a blend of 5 different bourbons from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Georgia, bottled at 57.12% ABV. The nose has touches of orange blossom, pecan wood, maple syrup, and cherry pie. Spices lead the palate with cinnamon and clove balanced by orange peel, vanilla cream, and cocoa powder. The finish is long with lingering spices and hints of caramel and nuts. I'm scoring the Bardstown Bourbon Company Discovery Series number 10 bourbon a 92. And finally, I received a sample of Bunnahabhain's Fagile released this week. It's matured in canasta sherry casks and bottled at 51.2% ABV. The nose is aromatic with touches of plums, dates, and figs, along with nutmeg, pecan pie, and raisin bread. The taste has a good balance of spices and dark fruits with cinnamon, white pepper, and a hint of clove, complemented by plums, raisins, figs, and dates. The finish is very long with a hint of spice and dark fruits. I'm scoring the Bunnahabhain Canasta Cask Matured Fagile 2023 Limited Edition a 94. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of nearly 3,500 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at WhiskyCast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
A pair of socks, a book, some suspect ties, a compact toolkit. Oh, another book. And a shaving kit. Actually, I could do with that. But anyway, sometimes you've got to take things into your own hands. Go on, treat yourself.
Happy Father's Day from Redbreast, proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
Let's open up the WhiskyCast community app and check in on this week's discussions. Our community segment is brought to you by Waterford Whiskey. Whiskey Ranked, Peter from Austria, posted a great comment complete with a graph. Here's what he had to say. What factors do you consider when purchasing whiskey? One might be ABV. How much does the strength of a whiskey affect your preference? How much more or less do you like cask strength versus 40% ABV? Is there a sweet spot somewhere in between? If you asked me, I would have said I prefer cask strength much more, but the chart below tells me otherwise. The horizontal axis is the ABV and the vertical axis is my personal score, and each dot is one whiskey. There is no significant correlation between the score and strength. This is useful when purchasing new whiskey. Now when I'm considering 2 different whiskeys, I know I should not place undue weight or pay more for cask strength. Russ Charity was one of those responding to Peter's post. Fascinating results. As an enthusiast of whiskey, but with what I consider an average ability of nosing and tasting, I too look for higher ABV expressions. I suppose because more knowledgeable enthusiasts have experienced enhanced results and passed along this knowledge to me. Until I build up a bigger library of knowledge, I rely on more experienced connoisseurs to inform my decisions. Thanks to everyone who posted in the app this week. If you'd like to join the discussion, download the free WhiskyCast community app from the Apple or Google app stores and jump right in. Our community segment is sponsored by Waterford Whiskey, where they explore the frontiers of natural flavor, one farm at a time, to create unique Irish whiskeys. Visit them on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history and science that makes whiskey unique. Whiskey is unique among consumer products in that it's often regulated at both the federal and state level in the U.S. Kentucky and Tennessee, though, are not the only states where there's an official standard for the state's whiskeys. For instance, Indiana now has a legal standard for what can be called Indiana rye whiskey. It has to be distilled and matured in Indiana to qualify as an Indiana rye. But perhaps the toughest set of standards to meet is in Missouri, where state lawmakers passed legislation several years ago defining the term Missouri Bourbon. That law sets a high bar. Not only does a whiskey have to be mashed, distilled, fermented, and matured in the state of Missouri, but it also has to be bottled there and made in barrels sourced from Missouri cooperages, and as of 2020, it now has to be made with corn supplied by Missouri farmers. One can only imagine the amount of lobbying that went into creating that legislation. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at WhiskyCast.com to get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find our free WhiskyCast community app in the Apple and Google App Stores, and you can always get in touch with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at WhiskyCast. Of course, email's an option too. Our address is comments@whiskycast.com.
The 2023 limited edition Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition is a fitting tribute to the 123rd U.S. Open. Find it if you can. Share it if you do, and enjoy it like a champion.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
A thoughtful gift is hard work. What you need is a go-to multi-purpose gift for all occasions. A bottle of Redbreast can say, "Enjoy every minute, they grow up so fast." Oh. And equally nails, "Apologies for the back pain, I should have just hired a moving company."
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast, Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2023, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.